So, welcome to Living a Courageous Life Gut Mind Connection. I'm Melinda Baxter of Pathways to Health. And for those of you that don't know me, I am a holistic health coach, master life coach, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, yoga teacher, and massage therapist. So, I wear many different hats, but the hats overlap. And I'm an advocate, wellness advocate for DoTerra. I work with their oils as a part of what I do. So I have been on this path and gotten onto this path. Well, I've been coaching for about 7.5 years, teaching yoga for over 10, and doing massage for much longer than that. But the other facets besides the massage all came after my daughter was born in 2004. She's 13 now. And I went on a pretty profound journey with regard to my health. I had a health crisis. I had a health crisis based in stress and overwhelm that started with her labor and delivery, and then kind of continued after she was born. I had her at home, but that process was quite arduous. I was under a lot of pain, under a lot of duress, and a few years ago when I started seeing an acupuncturist here up in Bath, and she was doing my intake, and I was describing my birth experience, and she said, "It really sounds like you had a gallbladder attack," because I just kept throwing up. There's the throwing up when you're transitioning, throwing up, and then there's the throwing up where you just keep throwing up. You can't keep anything down, and that was what was going on for me. So that was just one aspect of the labor that was pretty difficult. So I went into motherhood, and my body was in shock. I really believe that my body was in shock. I had burned a ton of muscle in my legs, and I was really wasted. And then she had colic for 3 months, and so that just kind of, my nerves were already pretty shot. My adrenal glands were probably pretty shot, and then she had colic, and so my nervous system just never really recovered. I mean, it's a hard thing to recover your nervous system when you have a newborn anyway, but colic on top of that, this doesn't make the process easy. And then my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and a really important person in my life died that winter. And so it just kind of kept going that way, where I just felt like I was getting hit repeatedly again and again. And so that first year of her life, I was doing my best to stick with alternative protocols and treatment and management for what I was going through with my naturopath, who was also my midwife. But I wasn't sleeping well at all. And by the end of that first year, I was really at loose ends. I was in a rough place. And so I went and finally saw a Western medicine doctor. And then after I had never been on any medications in my life, I came home with 3. And so that's just kind of the background, the backdrop for what eventually led me to pursue the health coaching piece, because I just felt like Racy was probably, I became a yoga teacher when she was 2.5, and it was probably a year or two after that when I became a health coach, and then subsequently the functional piece, and then the life coaching piece. But I felt like I needed answers. I needed more knowledge myself to be able to heal. Sorry, I think I have an eyelash in my eye, so let me just get that out because that's distracting. I wasn't satisfied with the answers I was getting in traditional medicine or even alternative medicine. I just wasn't feeling good about my progression. I was getting a little bit better, but not to the degree I felt like I should have been. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I had a couple panic attacks during the early years, and some depression, but it was more really anxiety. And my history with my personality and what I have a propensity towards is definitely more worry and anxiety, like not depression, but that sort of spectrum, on that mood scale. So I pursued the health coaching because I wanted answers for myself, but I also knew that I had something to offer to others. I love to teach. I love to coach. I love to help people get better, be better, You know, I have a background in character education from working at the Hyde School and going to the Hyde School. And that was what I did before she was born. And so I love that. That's who I am. Like, that's my potential, right? To help people become their best selves. And so this is another facet of that piece, the health coaching. So that's kind of my background and what I've been doing and working on for these 7.5 years. And the gut piece came into play pretty quickly, that I was noticing that my gut was off within that first year of her life. I didn't have, my appetite was pretty suppressed. You know, the anxiety that was leading to some panic attacks was pretty intense, that it was definitely squelching my appetite. And so I had weighed what I weighed that first year, I hadn't weighed since 9th grade. You know, and that's not typical for me. I like to eat, and I need to eat on a fairly regular schedule. And so this was definitely unusual. But then I started to have symptoms in my gut. Like, I started to have discomfort, and then that really progressed to the point where I was having a lot of bloating and gas, such that wearing a seatbelt felt really uncomfortable. I remember, I have a really vivid memory of going to see an acupuncturist in Yarmouth, and I just couldn't stand the pressure of the seatbelt, you know, or constricting pants. And so I was really just uncomfortable in my body. You know, I just felt badly a lot of the time. And it took a while for me to get answers. And then finally, I was diagnosed a few years ago with SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, if you're not familiar. And the primary symptoms of that are like just persistent gas and bloating. And so I had it for probably years, and nobody had picked up on it. You know, or a lot of practitioners don't know about it, still don't know about it, even though it's incredibly prevalent. Of the people who have IBS, the diagnosis IBS, you know, about 60%, 50 to 60% of them have SIBO. And so it is incredibly common. And the more I do this work and really attract people into my practice who have gut issues, those symptoms are very common. So I want to start to share my screen with you with the webinar that I've gotten together for tonight. And let me just get into my widescreen here. So the reason why I call it what I call it, Living a Courageous Life, Gut-Mind Connection, because I really do feel like so much healing can happen with our physical symptoms, including our mind symptoms, right? Not just our gut symptoms, but our mind symptoms, when we're willing to inhabit our lives fully, when we're really willing to be courageous. Because when we let fear take over, and I really believe that my health issues were stress induced, okay? So when fear takes over, creates a ton of stress in the body, and that stress creates inflammation, and that inflammation potentially creates leaky gut and a host of other negative symptoms in the body, including potentially setting up the stage for these illnesses that are rampant in our world right now, in our society: Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and cancer. Systemic inflammation has been proven to be the root of these particular diseases. So we want to deal with mitigating stress and mitigating inflammation in our bodies. So the first thing I want to offer to you, the first nugget, because there's 3 nuggets I want to offer for your takeaways tonight, is in the spirit of the title of this webinar and of the retreats I run and the programs I run, is to take a risk. So when we live in fear, actually, I was just talking to an old friend of mine. I worked for Outward Bound for a number of years after college, and she and I were close friends back then, and we were living in Oregon, and we were roommates for a while. And, you know, we stay in touch loosely, not closely, but we had a good catch up today. And, you know, she was talking about how her family is going to Costa Rica with her in-laws in February. And I was saying, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's like on my bucket list. The area they're going is this big surfing and yoga area. It's my dream trip to go there in Costa Rica. And she doesn't want to go because she's scared. She's scared about what might happen to her children when she's there. It's not about her. It's about her 11-year-old and her 9-year-old getting injured or sick or something. And I was offering her, and she's in therapy and she's really working on this piece, but I don't, not really in the way that's going to make a difference, because until we can manage our thoughts, we're in trouble. If our thoughts aren't serving us, if our thoughts are crappy thoughts, if our thoughts are fear-based thoughts, they're going to keep feeding on themselves with more fear. So the antidote to fear, right? There's a couple acronyms for fear. One is false evidence appearing real, right? So when we're in fear, it feels like it's direct proof evidence, whatever it is we're thinking. But 99.9% of the time, it's not. It's not true. It's not something that's going to come to pass, but it feels very real. And another acronym is face everything and rise. Or for some people, it's fuck everything and run. So excuse my language, but that's what, for a lot of people, that's what happens, is you just bail and don't push forward, when fear is really there to teach you the direction you need to go. So fear is showing you the steps you want to take. It's not showing you the direction you want to run, even though that's what it feels like. So when I went to Hyde, as I mentioned before, which is a character education school here in Bath, Maine, I went there from 1985 to 1989. And I did not go willingly. I did not want to be there. I was incredibly off track and unhappy and insecure. Just no self-esteem. And I got there as a sophomore, 14 years old, and I stayed on through my an elective postgraduate year when I was 18 when I graduated. And during those years, because Hyde is a place that demands that you take risks. You cannot just do the sports or the activities that you feel proficient in. You have to push yourself and do things that aren't in your comfort zone. And that was one of the biggest reasons that I graduated from there in 1989 with one of the highest accolades you can get at Hyde, which is all about leadership, right? It's not about academics. It's about leadership and personal development, because I went for it. At the end of the time there, I took everything that I had experienced and that had helped me begin to develop some real self-confidence, and went even a step further and just took risks that whole last year at Hyde. And that, for me, is why I feel like I developed some serious self-confidence and belief in myself. Does that mean I never have self-doubt? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, I have been through some pretty significant risks willingly and seen the payoff, right? So when you show up in a big way in your life, you get rewarded with the feeling of self-confidence and expanded self-worth. And the other thing, as I wrote here, you learn that you actually won't die when you face your fears, but absolutely the opposite, that you will feel enlivened and engaged in your life. And the other thing that happens when you show up and take risks is you tap into your creative force, right? Your creative life force, where inspiration can happen and will happen. As I've been preparing for this webinar, and I've been doing a bunch of Facebook Lives, I work with a coach, and I have for the last 2+ years, and she said, I want you to do 6 Facebook Lives leading up to your webinar. And so by doing that, I have been feeding my own creativity. And I just want to close this out for a sec, because wanted to see if any of you on the webinar right now want to unmute yourself and just take a risk on this webinar. We always have opportunities to take risks, and I always like to provide opportunities to take a risk in anything I'm leading, because it's a safe place. It's a safe place to do it. And when you practice doing that, you get better at it and you feel the results of doing it. So it can be whatever you want. You know, it could just be sharing a piece of your story of why you wanted to come on to this webinar. But whatever it is, you know, I would love to hold the space for you to do that right now, if any of you feel inclined. Okay, I'm going to go back to the screen share. Though, it seems like I closed it out, so bear with me for 1 sec while I get it back up. All right, here we go. Okay. So the second thing I want to talk about with you is the name of this webinar, the gut-mind connection. So literally talk about the gut-mind connection. So, you know, most people have a general understanding of what basic digestion is, right? We put food in our mouth, digestion starts in the mouth, there's enzymes that are released there. And so the more we chew our food, the better for our, you know, what happens beyond that in terms of the food assimilation and breakdown. So, you know, we've got this whole system that really is what with scientists, people that study the microbiome and the digestive system, doctors and whatnot, and researchers, basically say is a system, a tube that is actually external to the rest of our body. Like it is its own system, separate from the rest of the organs in our cardiovascular system. So the interface between our digestion and our bloodstream is in the small intestine through what's called is known as the brush border of the small intestine. Okay, and there are tight junctions in this brush border that are supposed to be tight, hence their name. And if we have issues, stress-induced inflammation in their gut, or food sensitivities, or you know we've gotten some kind of illness, etc., and we've got inflammation that's impacting the gut, in particular the small intestine, where the food assimilation and distribution happens, nutrient distribution happens. What can happen is what's called leaky gut, which you may have heard of, which is really pervasive. And so what happens is that inflammation impacts the way the tight junctions are working, such that they're not so tight anymore. And so the little minuscule pinprick of an opening that they are supposed to be allowing so the nutrients pass into our bloodstream and get distributed, becomes larger. And in that larger hole, now food particles can pass through, right? And those food particles are not something that the body identifies as what they know to be appropriate to be in the bloodstream. And so they start to attack it, basically, and treat it as a foreign body, because essentially it is, because it's not really meant to be there. And that's actually a big cause of food sensitivities. So when we're in utero, the tissue that it becomes our brains and becomes what's called our second brain, our enteric nervous system, that's basically housed in our gut, in the tissue of the gut, are separated from the same tissue when we're in the womb. And so those two systems are incredibly linked. And the linkage happens via the vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve plexus in our body. It runs from the brainstem down into the gut. And it's a two-way communication highway. So the classic example is if you've ever run or done any kind of athletic event. For me, I think of running because it happened for me when I was running track in high school. It was the only individual sport I ever did. I always did team sports otherwise. So before I was going to do to run a race, I had to run to the bathroom. You know, it was like, boom. It's like I needed to evacuate my bowels, you know, which is super common. If you get really nervous or you get anxious about something, that's your body wants to evacuate because it's going into fight or flight, essentially. And when we're in fight or flight, we want to jettison anything that might hold us back from from being able to flee for our lives, which is where that whole instinct evolved, right? It was a total survival instinct from way, way, way back. Now, we don't live that life anymore, right? We don't have to run for our lives really ever. But yet we still have this instinct within us that kicks in sometimes at the least provocation. And it's not very helpful, right? But we haven't evolved past that yet. So the work that I do is actually part of the evolution, because we are as a human species in an evolution in terms of like kind of our computer system, if you will, right? It takes a lot longer than Apple to get a new operating system on board. Like it takes us hundreds of years really to evolve, but we are in an evolution right now with moving more towards our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's the newest part of our brain, and that's our higher brain, right? It's not our primal brain, which is where the fight or flight response comes from. So, one of the big things that I teach is how to kind of override that fight or flight and talk yourself off a ledge, essentially, so that you're not in that fight or flight state. So many people are in a low grade fight or flight state all the time. That was me for a little while. And I'm going to talk about, give you a very stark story from my own experience in the next piece. So, you want to reduce stress. That is this nugget number 2, is working with this gut-mind connection and reducing stress, because I can assure you that stress will hammer your gut. I know that it did mine, right? And so stress-induced gut issues are very common, or stress-induced or stress-compounded gut issues, right? A lot of people have, I had a little bit of symptoms with my gut prior to all of this, but nothing that was as dramatic as what happened. So there often can be some background with gut issues, but the stress will compound your experience. So reducing stress is one of the biggest things you can do for your gut-mind connection and your brain and gut wellness. Because sometimes gut issues show up not as gut symptoms, but as brain fog, or just like not having such good recall. Some of it can be attributed to aging, but there's a really great doctor out there, Dr. Datis Kharrazian, who's just written some phenomenal books and does some really cutting edge research. And one of his books that I read is Why Isn't My Brain Working? And he talks about so many of the symptoms that most Western docs want to chalk up to age related are really not. That they can be managed and affected by taking care of the systems in the body, like the gut system and like the endocrine system, the hypothalamus, pituitary axis, adrenals and thyroid, and supporting the liver. That we can actually do a lot to manage these symptoms that we've all just decided, because the doctors have said it's normal with aging to have these symptoms. They say that he actually talks about how one of the first symptoms of Parkinson's is constipation, right? So that's not something that most doctors really are going to think of as a red flag. They might give you some Metamucil or something, right? But there's something bigger going on. We don't want to just treat the symptoms. We want to get to underlying root cause, which is one of my big priorities with the work that I do, is not to just deal with symptoms, but to deal with what the underlying cause is, right? So when we are in this low grade state of stress, we over time we lose our ability to be resilient to stress. Maybe some of you have experienced that. That's when the HPA axis, this hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, has been stressed to the point where the littlest thing can set you off. I call it, you just don't have any resilience to stress. It's really very common, right? The term burnout has been in our society for a long time. Let me just take a sip of water here. And what that term burnout is referring to exactly what I'm talking about. It's actually the endocrine system being tired and not functioning the way we need it to. It's supposed to help us get up and go and deal with the stressors. Like, life is going to be full of stress. That's the reality. We want to be able to handle it and really rise to it without it just knocking us down and making us sick, essentially. So the enteric nervous system in the gut, it has neurons and neurotransmitters and electrical signals like our brain tissue does. And as I said before about the Parkinson's, it shows up in the gut before it shows up in the brain. So we want to have a healthy gut. Super important. We want to be going to the bathroom daily. We want to be moving the toxins out. Incredibly essential. And like I said, if you guys have any questions or anything that come up while I'm talking, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in, okay? So, stress management, right? There are certainly great techniques out there. I'm a yoga teacher. Yoga is phenomenal for managing stress. Yogic breathing. I was doing some yogic breathing before I got on the call, because even though I love public speaking, there's always some nerves before I get on and do something like this. So just like calming my energy, grounding my energy, meditation, one of the best ways to get to know yourself and get to know your thoughts. You may not like what you find. I ran a free meditation challenge a week or so ago, and one of my participants was saying, I've been trying to meditate, but I can't stop thinking, and the thoughts I'm thinking are so negative, and so I can't do it. I'm not good at it. And I reassured her that there's no good or bad with meditation. It's not a competitive sport. It is an opportunity to go inward. And yes, if you have a hyperactive monkey mind and your thoughts tend towards the negative, it is going to be uncomfortable when you start that process. But it is still essential to stay with it. Because if you don't know and you don't become conscious and awake to the thoughts you're thinking, you can't change them. Right? You're just going to keep replaying the habitual patterns of your thinking over and over and over again, like you have for years. And so in order to interrupt them and begin to create new habits, you have to be awake and aware of them. And so there's discomfort, because then you got to look at, why do you even have such bad negative thoughts about yourself? And it could take some personal work or coaching, to help you get through that. And that's okay. Right? So healing your GI, because it's going to affect your mind, your brain. Right? So when we heal our GI, the predominance of our serotonin is housed in our gut. Majority of our melatonin is produced in the gut. Our immune system is primarily housed in the gut. So when we heal our gut, we heal our minds and our brains too, and other parts of our bodies. So that one I can't emphasize enough. So self-care, I have my clients who struggle with self-care. I have them schedule it into their calendars as a non-negotiable. If you're going to heal, you have to prioritize yourself with whatever that feels good to you, right? That doesn't feel stressful. So some of these things are, obvious choices, but maybe there's some other things that could go on that list. Getting support in the form of a coach or therapist. I am definitely biased towards coaching, not just because I am a coach, but because of my experience with my coach. I had 4 years at Hyde that were absolutely life-changing and profound. And in between my years at Hyde and up until 2.5 years ago, I've done a ton of therapy. Ann and I, who's on here, Ann and I did an intense transformational process called the Hoffman process 6 years ago or so. But the thing that's been the most profound, besides my high school experience, is the coaching I've done with my coach. It's action oriented. It's about accountability and support, and it just moves things along faster, in my experience with my own clients and with myself personally. I am coming off of, in a week, I'm coming off of almost 9 weeks on crutches. I hurt my knee in October pretty significantly, tore my meniscus really badly, had to wait 3 weeks to have surgery. And in that time I was on crutches because I couldn't straighten my leg. And then I had the surgery, they repaired it. So that's another 6 weeks on crutches. And besides the first few days when this is my 7th knee surgery. It's been a long time. It's been 16 years since my last one, but there was some post-traumatic stress around hurting my knee that badly again. And so after the first few days of dealing with that emotion, and really, I made some videos and shared them with my coaching group, It was just me. They weren't responding in real time, but I just like got the emotions out. It was a really profound healing technique for me. But the other piece, like I have handled it extremely well. And I'm telling you, if it was 2-3 years ago, I would not have handled it this well. I would have been really difficult to live with. I would have been far more moody and depressed and anxious. And I'm so proud of myself, but I know what it says to me is that the work I've been doing in the last few years is really, it's made a big difference because I've been able to manage my mind. So that's definitely I'm a huge fan of coaching. And supplements can be really and essential for bringing the body back in line, especially if your stress response is way out of whack. I definitely utilize that when I have to, which is not, it definitely is a part of the healing process for a lot of people. Okay, sorry, I skipped ahead there. So I just want to put that meme up, and I want to, hang on.
Hey, Melinda, you're not sharing your slides.
You can't see my slides?
Correct. We're seeing your video still.
Oh. All right. Well, you didn't miss a lot, but thank you, Kurt. It was mostly me talking, and I will get the, but I wanted to, before I go back up into the screen share that you will see this next time, any comments or questions? Anything anybody wants to share at this point? I see the chat box, so I'll take a look there. All right, still not seeing your slides, not sharing. All right. Thanks, guys.
Question. You said
Yes.
you said that you do actually recommend some supplements in process. I'm just curious what kind of supplements you do recommend for people who have gut issues.
Yeah. Can you tell me your name? Because I don't know that we know each other.
We don't. I'm Fan. And
Oh, you're
Fan
my second cousin, or first cousin once removed.
Exactly. And
oh, yay!
I have had gut issues for ages, and I just found out that you do all this wonderful coaching.
No, my mom's been keeping me abreast of her communication. So wonderful to meet you.
And you. So thank you for this.
Yes, you're welcome. And thanks for being here, Fan. So Fan is my mom's first cousin that she's just reconnected with, and it's very cool. So I recommend, first and foremost, when I don't know exactly what you're dealing with, and you and I can talk one-on-one, Fan, L-glutamine is the primary supplement that any of you work with L-glutamine?
Nope, I haven't, but I know of it. Okay.
Yeah, so L-glutamine helps heal the gut lining.
Okay.
So as I talked about that leaky gut process, it's nourishing and healing to the tissue of the gut lining. And that is, 6 or 7 years ago, the supplement that really helped me turn a corner. It wasn't the end all be all, but I noticed significant improvement. And I took, so basically 1,500 milligrams with each meal for a number of years. Wow. Now I just don't, I take it here and there. But okay. I kind of worked up to it. You could probably start with that and be fine. It's usually very well tolerated for most people. And the other things that I recommend for people who have gut issues, I highly recommend a digestive enzyme. Okay. Because when you have gut issues, you're usually not breaking down your food well. Yep. And so you want to give yourself that support to get the food broken down more effectively before it's entering into the small intestine, in the stomach. And then as long as there's not an H. pylori infection, hydrochloric acid is also another great one. And you would know if you take hydrochloric acid and you feel worse, like you feel acidic from it, then you don't need hydrochloric acid. If you take hydrochloric acid and you feel fine, and and you can kind of titrate the dose up until you do feel a little bit of heat, and then you come down to the dose before. And that's kind of where you find your set point with HCl. So those are 3 really, really good ones that I can say. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let me get this. I think I know what happened. Hang on, I'm going to minimize you guys for a sec. I cannot minimize. Okay, all right, so let me see. Kurt, you were my PowerPoint guy too. You taught me how to do PowerPoint way back when, but we weren't doing Zoom. I wasn't doing Zoom when you were teaching me. So, all right, let me just, I think I know what's going on here. Okay. All right, so now I will go back to the screen share. There's a sequence you have to do or it won't work. Oh, but where is that now? Oh, it's got to be there. Well, we're going to see. We're going to see if I'm going to be able to do my screen share. Should be there. All right, bear with me. Each time I do this, I learn. There it is. Okay, so once it's on my screen, I just can't minimize it. All right, so there we go. All right, yay. Well, I want people to be able to see what I've done. So mostly this is, the other stuff I spoke about, so it's not stuff that you really need to see. But meditation, awesome. I am in no way super consistent with my meditation yet, but it's something that I've gotten more committed to since the summer than I ever have been, because I felt meditation to be intimidating. Years ago, I felt like I couldn't do yoga because that was too slow. And then I've been doing yoga for years, and yoga really is prep for meditation. So when I am able to sit, I really notice the positive effects. So I love this meme because the reality, and I've had this stored away, and then my cleanse coach whom I love, posted it again today. And I just love this meme because we are all flawed, and that is the reality. And you can't change that. So you might as well embrace it and really own the entirety of who you are. So as I've talked about my experience being on crutches and really being super proud of myself for how I've handled it, I know that one of the big reasons I have handled it as well as I did is in the last 2 years, the biggest thing that shifted for me is I have started to have my own back, right? So that is the nugget number 3, is have your own back. Because ultimately, if we don't show up for ourselves, if we don't really take care of the thoughts we're thinking and the beliefs that we're allowing ourselves to live by, right? The old habits that don't serve us, then we are not going to be feeling so good about ourselves in life. And we're going to expect others to prop us up. And we're going to be disappointed when they don't, right? Because if we can't take care of ourselves very well, how can we expect others to really take care of us very well? Ultimately, we have to do the work for ourselves. We have to, doesn't matter how old you are, you're going to have to show up and take care of your inner child. Because when you get triggered by somebody or some event, that's what's being triggered, is the little person inside of you. It's not the adult self. It's that child self. And it's there always, right? It doesn't matter how much work you've done. Doesn't matter how old you are. You're going to be triggered throughout your life. That's the reality. And so if you are willing to do the work to really understand that and learn to love yourself up regardless of what's going on, you're going to reap the rewards. And you're not going to expect anybody else to do that for you, because reality is they can't. I've tried really hard to have other people do it for me for a lot of my life, and it does not work. I can't change anyone. I can't make somebody in my likeness, right? Which is, often what we try and do with our spouses. We try and turn them into us. Like, we don't want that, really. But what we want is to feel grounded and loved and good about ourselves. And guess what? The good news is you can give that to yourself. And that is awesome. But yeah, it takes some deep work, and it takes commitment, and it really takes curating your thoughts, right? I keep talking about this lately because there's a whole model called the thought model, right? That we start with a thought always, and then we have a feeling, right? The thought generates some kind of feeling, and then we have action that we take or inaction. But either way, we get some kind of result. And that sort of starts to pave the way to our destiny, right? All the time. This is how it works. Thought, emotion, action or inaction, result. And so if you're not feeling good, if you're feeling stressed, you're feeling anxious, whatever it is, ask yourself what that thought is that's hosting that feeling. Because then you can do something about it. You can say, is this thought true? Is this thought serving me? You know, if you're familiar with Byron Katie's work, right, you've got to tease out the facts from the fiction. And so much of our stories and our thoughts are BS. They're not real. This goes back to when we were talking about the fear, right? It's false evidence appearing real, because most of those thoughts are fear-based thoughts that are trying to keep us down and keep us safe, right? Because that's that primal part of ourselves that just wants us to stay safe, right? There may be some animal out there that's going to kill us. So if we don't stay safe, we die, which is not true anymore. We don't live in that world, but yet our brain does. And so this is the prefrontal cortex work, that we bring our higher mind to bear on this part of our brain that wants us to be living in fear and staying safe. Don't take a risk, right? The opposite of what I said. First thing to do to help heal your life and your body is to have courage and take risks, right? That part of our body, we have to work against that all the time. Because like I said, in our lifetime, we're not going to get a new operating system, right? This is the operating system we have, and it wants to kick into that fight or flight. And so the more we can retrain, make new habits, lay down new pathways in the brain, because we can create new neural pathways in the brain. The old ones don't go away, but we can create new habits. I'm sure you've all done it in your own lives, created new habits, whether it be exercise or food or whatever it is, you know? So we can create new habits. When we're triggered, sometimes we go back to the old habits, but we can bring our higher mind to bear. And so when we notice that we're triggered, when we notice that that our inner child is feeling hurt or scared or whatever it is, we can soothe ourselves. We can talk to ourselves. We can choose the thoughts that we want to think in response to those feelings. And, you know, it just comes down to having your own back. And it's not about Pollyanna positivity. Like, that's not at all what I'm talking about, because I don't believe in that. I believe that, you know, there's a time and a place for sadness. There's a time and a place for anger, right? There's a time and a place for the whole melange of our emotions. It's when we get caught in the gerbil, you know, the gerbil wheel, where we don't just feel those feelings and move through them. We get stuck because we're thinking thoughts that are keeping us stuck. No, we need to experience when something's sad. We want to be able to feel sad. We don't want to just feel happy all the time. That wouldn't be appropriate. So it's not about the emotions themselves as being bad. It's our thoughts that we think. All right, here's one for you that's kind of interesting. The whole concept that nobody can hurt your feelings. Right? This one is pretty interesting. I had to think about it when I learned it, but it really makes a ton of sense. We hurt our own feelings by the thoughts we think that relate to somebody's actions, right? Because if somebody does something that triggers hurt in us, they may not, I mean, maybe they're trying to hurt our feelings. Maybe they're just not, you know, but either way, it's the thoughts that we're thinking relative to their behavior or their words that make us feel hurt. You know, we want to give away our responsibility a lot for our emotional landscape and how we're feeling. But the more we can take back and claim responsibility, response ability, right? Take the I out and make it an A in responsibility, because it's your ability to respond effectively to situations is going to be incredibly helpful and make or break how that experience is for you. If you want to abdicate and give that person the power to hurt your feelings, you can be hurt all day long. I've done plenty of that. I'm sure we all have, right? And it feels nice to kind of blame somebody, you know, they did that to me. But it's more powerful and empowering when we say, oh, wow, I feel hurt because they triggered something in me. You know, that's an old story, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not lovable, right? That I'm invisible, that I'm, etc. We've all got some variety of that basically amounts to I'm not lovable, really, is sort of the core one. There's this little different wordings around that. Because that's ultimately what we're here to do. We want to be loved. We want to give love. That's really the essence of our spirit self, our true self. We get caught up in all this other stuff that our minds want to tell us. And so the more we can work on really taking care of ourselves and really curating our thoughts like it's the most important job you have, because it really is. Honestly, if you want to live your potential and you want to go out and do what you're capable of and you're meant to do and shine your light, you're going to have to get a handle on those thoughts, because if you don't, they're going to keep you playing small a lot of the time. And the world needs your light, each and every one of us. Unique light is needed now as much as ever. So before I switch gears here and sort of shift to the last part of this webinar, any comments or thoughts, questions? Oh, you're gonna have to unmute. So unmute yourself. You're trying to talk. Go down to your lower left-hand corner and undo the microphone button with the red. Here we go. Want me to unmute you? You're unmuted. Did you want to ask a question?
Oh, no, I was just going to say yes on that shining light.
Oh, thanks, Pat.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah.
So if anybody else has any comments or questions and you're muted, please just go ahead and unmute yourself in the bottom left of your screen.
I just wanted to say, Melinda, can you hear me?
I can, Ann.
Okay, this is really good stuff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's definitely near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Very near and dear to my heart. So a little water break for everybody. That's good too. So
People see me.
this webinar is in service of something that I am creating that I'm really excited about, and I'm going to tell you about it now. It's I've done something, a smaller version of it a couple times a few years back, but in the interim years, I've started working with my coach, and I've just continued to grow and learn about this topic and applying it in my own life and applying it to my clients. And so I want to share with you what I'm going to be launching in early February, which is my 3-month Living a Courageous Life Gut Mind Reboot. So I do a lot of private coaching and I do group cleanses, but I haven't run a group program in a while. And I really love running them for multiple reasons. I love the community and the group aspect of the work and the collaboration and support that happens from that atmosphere. But I also like to offer a more affordable experience for people to work with me and to get my materials and to get my coaching and really do some profound work on your health and your wellness. So, the process is a deep dive into the gut healing, and with a really, so if you're moving around, maybe I'll just mute you, because I am muted you. I'll mute you. Okay. To a full guide of recipes. These are compilation of I've been running seasonal cleanses for 4 or 5 years. It's an anti-inflammatory cleanse based on the elimination diet. The recipes are fabulous. People love the food, super satisfying. So it's going to be, I'm going to combine a bunch of them so you have a ton of recipes to support you during the process. And offering whether you want to work with some essential oils, specific techniques to support the connection between the mind and the brain because of that stress, how it impacts the gut. And there's actually exercises you can do to support the vagus nerve to help bring the vagus nerve online. Because sometimes when we're having gut health issues, especially if you have SIBO, which you may or may not know, but you might have symptoms that are very SIBO-like, that the vagus nerve stops working effectively. And so it gets basically lazy. And so that gut-mind connection isn't as strong. And there are ways to support bringing that back on. Some of them are some pranayama and some other things that you can do. So we'll be working with stress reduction practices. Part of the process is just self-care will be a big, huge piece of it. And what you will get from joining this program is 3 months worth of the recipes that I was telling you about. That will definitely be a big piece in the healing process. Supplementary support. There's an option if you want to add it on to run some testing, because I run testing through my functional piece. So if you want to figure out what some of the underlying causes are, and so we can target more specifically, that can be really important and sometimes essential. I'm going to be doing Facebook Lives in our private group where I'm going to be teaching you techniques about healing your gut and the life coaching skills around mind management and mind health. There'll be a monthly group call where I'm going to be teaching you strategies, specific strategies, and doing live coaching. And then on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Facebook group, I'm going to be prompting you with and engaging you with specific exercises, ranging from journaling and meditation to other challenges out in the world. Risk taking, for example. How can you take a risk today? Just a bunch of the aspects that I've been talking about tonight, and really putting those into practice through the support and accountability of this group. That when you show up for yourself in this way and you make a commitment, that you're going to get you're going to reap what you sow. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. And I used to run this as a 30-day program, which is too short. But even in 30 days, I was having people make really significant progress. I know now, with gut healing, especially, 3 months isn't going to get you all the way there, depending on how long you've been having gut issues. Like you mentioned, Fan, a lot of people have had them for years. But 3 months is going to give you a great start, and you're going to have tons of tools. It might take a year. Sometimes, like with my gut issue with SIBO, there's no real cure for it. But I have figured out how to manage it so that it's not running my life and wreaking havoc, that I feel really good, 95% of the time. And I'm good with that, like that is okay with me. So yeah, some of the takeaways: better digestion, right? If it's gas and bloating or reflux, constipation, diarrhea, absolutely. You're going to be in a much better place after the work. So inflammation, as I talked about, being the root of a lot of illness, you're going to have reduced inflammation. And that may show up for you in ways you weren't even expecting. Because sometimes when we're in an inflamed state, we're so used to it, we don't even know what we're experiencing is a problem. We're just like, this is my life, this is how my body is, etc. So you may find, and you probably will, as you reduce the inflammation, and you're like, oh my gosh, that pain I had in my right big toe forever is gone. Right? Weird little things like that you just come to accept as part of the deal will probably start to clear up. And also a big piece of my cleanses that I run, so I usually run them as 2-week cleanses, and after a week of being on the cleanse and people transition, they know even in that time that there's some foods that they were eating, that even 7 days off of those foods calms the inflammation response enough that you have a response. Because sometimes when you're eating a food that bothers you, your body is so used to it, is in this level of inflammation that you don't really notice the symptoms. And then you come off the food and when you add it back in, and you're like, oh my gosh, I felt X, Y, and Z, and I know that eggs don't work for me, or gluten doesn't work for me, or whatever it is. So there will be a chunk of the latter part of the time together, we'll be working through the transition and really identifying some of the foods that you may or may not know about. Balanced blood sugar, that's huge. We want to have balanced blood sugar throughout our days. We don't want to be spiking. Some of you may not know that when you drink coffee on an empty stomach, actually coffee is one of the only substances that enters our bloodstream in the mouth, and it spikes our blood sugar. So any of my clients I'm not a coffee drinker, but plenty of people are. So any of my clients that are used to drinking coffee on an empty stomach, I'm like, please just do it with food. So you're at least assimilating that in a better way. It's more level, because when you spike your blood sugar first thing in the morning, you then set the stage for cravings, because the blood sugar goes up, then it crashes, and then your body wants another hit, and so you get on this roller coaster, which is bad for your body. It's bad for obviously your pancreas, and it's just not good for your overall stability of mood. All systems of the body are at a deficit when we're spiking our blood sugar and crashing. So obviously reducing stress is going to be a huge piece. I've talked a lot about that tonight, and that is a central component of the work that we will do. So brain exercises that are related to the vagus nerve. And this other piece that has been so huge for me that I could never ever teach this work without addressing is the limiting beliefs and patterns and programs that are running in your life that are keeping you unwell. You can only get so far in your health and wellness if you're not addressing this emotional mental piece of your life. I can't do health coaching without the life coaching. I was doing life coaching before I did my life coaching training because of my high years and just, what I've done in my own life. It's essential. It's essential. So those have to be partnered very, very closely. So any questions or comments about that? The investment for this program is going to be $250 a month. which is a vastly decreased number for what I would charge you. We were doing private coaching, so it's going to be you're going to get a ton of resources and my time for a really, really, really good price. And I promise you, you will get your money's worth and then some out of this process. I've been doing this long enough that I can stand behind my work incredibly confidently, and hope that you will consider joining in with this. As I said, it'll run February 4th through May 7th, which takes into account a week in April. I'll probably be out of the country, hopefully in Haiti again with my whole family, doing one more trip to this children's home that my daughter and I went to when she was 8. So that's hopefully where I'll be for a week in April. But yeah, any questions before we close this webinar? And I'm right on time, so I like that a lot.
No questions, but thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And I thank you all for showing up and taking the time to be here. And I hope to see some of you in my program. It's not you can't enroll yet. I'm still working on the details, but by early January, the enrollment will be open for this program. I'm gonna keep it to a smallish group because I like the intimacy, and I really want to be able to help people address individually as much as I can. So I want to keep it small. So yeah, well, the last thing is, just a big thank you, and nice to see you, Ann and Fan. So lovely to see your face. I see my family resemblance in you, actually, with my mom, which is so cool. So cool. Lovely. So, well, and Fan, please connect with me too, off of here.
I will, thank you.
Great. So thank you all so much, and have
Thank
a great evening. You're welcome, Ann. You're so
Thank
welcome.
you, Melinda. Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Melinda.
You're welcome, Kurt. Thanks for you and Shannon to come on.
You bet.
All right. I'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.